Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Sleepy Hollow The Missing Episodes. Last time, the seven sacred virtues have actually been discovered by Team Witness. And it turns out that the seven sacred virtues were once wielded by their deceased loved ones and family members. Like, Grace Dixon passed it along the virtue of faith, along with her bloodline, to Jenny, and Abby actually got the virtue of justice and passed it on from August to Diana. Actually, Alex had the virtue of hope, since not virtue of hope, the virtue of charity, while Jake had the virtue of hope, thanks to his ancestor Paul Jennings, who was a former member of Agency 355. Gavin had the virtue of fortitude passed down by his ancestor Leon. Diana actually, no, Laura actually had the virtue of temperance, which is passed down by Diana, as well as Mitch Talbot. And Ichabod actually had the virtue of prudence, which is actually known as the chartier of the virtues, which was passed down from George Washington, Chief Trigado, as well as the first witness, which is either Moses or Elijah. Could be one or the other, or it could just be both. Maybe they're both witnesses, I don't know. But it's quite possible. So, I still didn't come up with an idea for Nick Hawley, but rather as a different idea. You'll see. So, we actually have Chapter 4, Lil Lucas Lost. This next chapter covers a couple things. One is the return to Sleepy Hollow, the other is reuniting with some old flames, as well as dealing with Gavin's bitter feelings toward them, and the spirit of his common ancestor Leon. So fair warning, this chapter may contain some character bashing here and there. Chapter 4, Lil Lucas Lost. So Ichabod was looking over Gavin's diary at his flat. He was correcting any grammar and spelling errors, and it was quite valuable since he wanted it to be a part of the vaults and archives database of the paranormal, much like Benjamin Franklin's entries. Then something fascinating came to him. It was the passage Gavin written down during his dream, where he was in an altered Sleepy Hollow while still learning about his lost common ancestor, Leon Lucas. If you've seen my one-shot, The Lucas Legacy, you should know this. I highly admire your great courage, Mr. Lucas. It's no question you would have possessed the virtue of fortitude, and later passed it on to Gavin after a few centuries. He does resemble you strongly, just as Miss Jenny and Abby both represent Mrs. Dixon. His appreciation was soon interrupted when he picked up a call from someone. He eventually realized it belonged to Sophie. Oh, Miss Foster! I hadn't heard from you since Abby passed. So great to hear from you again. Listen, I apologize for not stopping over on our way to Sleepy Hollow. The conversation was cut short. His face suddenly became somber. What's wrong? Daniel Reynolds? Died how? Paused for a few moments. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll come over to pay my respects. He was a great man. Abby was a very close friend to him. He soon cut the connection and alerted his neighbors Alex and Jake that a friend in need was waiting for him. They also volunteered to go, and the word spread to Jenny and Gavin, to Laura, then Diana and Molly. The sergeant was more reluctant than anyone else who was willing to grieve with Ichabod. He never seemed to like the head of the FBI's Westchester branch, or even the artifact hunter for that matter. Neither did I. I didn't like Season 3's new characters very much, except for Joe. Maybe a little bit of Ezra. Since he was concerned and curious in how much Sleepy Hollow would change from the new political shift, as well as how it'll affect their mission, he eventually sucked it up and accepted to go to Reynolds' funeral. According to Sophie, she told the witness that it was scheduled for noon at the boneyard. What actually helped convince him more was that Diana, Alex, Jake, and even Molly were coming along. To Diana's credit, though, well, I suppose the funeral couldn't be any more convenient, she responded enthusiastically into her cell. Spring break has just started. We've been planning to take Molly to Sleepy Hollow so she could see the sights. Gavin did give her that idea until the vacation was over. Her daughter was overjoyed but also a bit saddened from the news. And this was a risky move since her future vessel will also be present. The two weren't worried as Diana would meet Laura at the vault while she stands guard. I'm sure she's already visited Sleepy Hollow in the future, especially since she worked with the Four Horsemen. Especially since she worked with the Four Horsemen. Dreyfus and Job must have shown her. By 11:45, everyone but two people rendezvoused a few feet away from the police department. The lots were undoubtedly crowded with mourners and associates of Danny's. Sophie was eagerly waiting for her friends, and they were all dressed to the nines. The men wore spiffy tuxes, the women were wearing short dresses, and Molly, close to her mom's side, had on the costume during that Revolution assembly. I wish I'd seen more of that. It was cute. The reunion was brief, and Sophie described Danny Reynolds as well as carrying the sad news. He had actually committed suicide, and his body was found last week in his own home. She theorized it may be possible that Sheriff Reyes may be the one to take his place as the head of the FBI in the Westchester branch. And Sophie could be the new sheriff, though it was still under discussion by the director, Walters. That was before he himself died by a demon several weeks ago. Ichabod and company knew it was done by Job when they were looking for the Philosopher's Stone's final piece. Sophie said Reynolds was in so much grief after Abby passed, wishing he wouldn't have been so strict, distant, and cold to her, as well as forcing her to make the decision to resign at one time. Sophie wanted Ichabod, Jenny, and Gavin to return to Sleepy Hollow and pay their respects. The Freemason recalled Gavin was hesitant since he didn't really have a good relationship with him either. Even though they never met, he held some grudges to him on how he was treating Abby. So did I. He deserves this. That if he was truly an old friend of hers, he would have been more understanding. You think? Eventually, both Jenny and Gavin via the camper met up with Sophia Foster. He donned on the same outfit he wore for Carolyn's tribute, while Jenny was wearing a short olive-colored dress. As soon as Gavin saw her, he seemed to be harboring some uncomfortable feelings towards her. Nevertheless, she managed to crack a smile to him after she embraced Jenny for a moment. Hey, Gavin, remember me? Oh, yeah, I remember you. I remember you as a damned lousy replacement for Abby Mills trying to take her job away. He was lucky they were out of earshot as he continued to rant from when she first quit to her sudden death. Ichabod and Jenny had held him back when he was closed in on her. Gabby took a few deep breaths. Looks like he hasn't forgotten about me. Amongst the lamenters, Gavin found a familiar path toward one of his most nostalgic places. He opened the two wide wooden doors and viewed the archives. He began to feel more at ease while he stepped in and gazed at the massive library. I thought I'd find you here. Oh, Jenny, I didn't know you followed me here. I took a wild guess. You always loved this place. Yeah, brings back a lot of memories. I wish we'd stop by here more often. Jenny reassured Gavin that it wasn't entirely Sophia's fault, nor Daniel's. Sophie felt saddened by the time of Abby's and Joe's deaths. In fact, it was revealed just last week that Daniel Reynolds killed himself from a drunken stupor. Sophie was there as his replacement since she was the most skilled out of all the recruits in case of an emergency. She figured that Danny ended his life and went in a downward spiral, wishing he was more supportive of Abby's decision since he had feelings for her, and was her old flame way back in the academy. Jenny also stated to Gavin that she too had some bitter feelings for Sophie since she assumed she was a rival when it came to artifact hunting, and she was uneasy since she worked for the FBI, who's more loyal to Reynolds. But she later realized if it wasn't for Sophie and her father Ezra, they never would have helped her find Ichabod. But you were in the Himalayas. She shortly left after Ezra, against Walter's wishes, revealed his location since he was held captive for a fortnight. And then there was John Wilkes Booth's Demon, which is the season 4 premiere. Nice comeback. And ironically, Brennan. No, wait. Is it Booth? No, it's definitely Booth. I forgot his first name, but Booth from Bones is actually John Wilkes' descendant. Go figure. Ugh. She reminded Gavin that Sophie never meant to take her sis's place as another FBI agent and tarnish her departure. After all, she did work for them after Nevins was abducted. Gavin had almost forgotten that. They hugged each other, and he thanked her for guiding him on the right path. It was just the same as meeting Ichabod for the first time. Misunderstanding. She offered him to come along and stand by during the funeral. They both immersed into the graveyard. Next to Reynolds' tombstone, there were the many sorrowers, as well as Ichabod and the others who were shielded by their officers. Some of them were even holding long guns, and by the time a bagpipe was playing Amazing Grace, Race ordered the gunman to shoot into the air as his casket lowered beneath ground. Chloe's coffin was decorated with an American flag and an emblem representing the Federal Bureau of Investigation. By the time the pairing met again, Gavin immediately apologized to Sophie. She actually admired how much stronger he had become, both emotionally and physically. His friends really spoke highly of him, especially during that great time of loss. Team Witness decided to hang out at the good old archives, and much like the vault, Molly was intrigued. From there, Gavin gave Sophie a copy of the journals the gang collaborated. She was impressed by the results. From his rank from corporal to sergeant to the fact that Crane was the head of Agency 355, to Jenny having a job as an artifact hunter, even the long story of the next chosen witness in Washington, as well as Dreyfus's downfall. Even she was baffled as to how and why Abby chose a kid to carry the mantle. Nevertheless, there was no answers, even now. Sophie actually saw the six of them revisit Sleepy Hollow briefly, but as usual, they were on the move, and she didn't get a chance to say hi. As they were in deep discussion of their mission, from Ichabod being damned to Laura's involvement, Gavin suddenly saw his reflection in a mirror from his peripheral vision, although it wasn't himself staring back at him. He noticed that there was someone else who gave him a curious glance. He looked much like Gavin, but his outfit was different. He was wearing an olive green cap with a matching short-sleeved top and beige leather pants. Did you? Gavin looked back at his comrades, though they never budged. When he faced the mirror again, his reflection returned to normal. It was just probably my imagination, he thought as he shook his head. A day later, Molly and Jenny were absent from the group as she was showing the child witness to some of the most iconic spots of her journeys. Out of nostalgia and curiosity, Gavin returned to the same mirror and saw the mysterious person staring back. He murmured to himself, could this be a person from another time? Perhaps my common ancestor Leon? Perplexed, both he and the stranger reached out a hand. When Gavin touched the glass, their hands met through a ripple. There was a surge going through his arm. He immediately backed away, feeling the warm buzzing aftershock. He looked down at his palm, which seemed unscathed. Then to the mirror, seeing only his own reflection. All of a sudden, his forehead began to squirm and move like someone messing around with a special effect. Oh. He held his poor head. It was throbbing with intense pain. Found himself screaming in agony as well. Then his eyes turned glossy and his voice was the same. What he said shocked his friends after he stormed to them and begged desperately, "Help me! I'm trapped within this time. I'm a restless spirit who wandered here. I found this fellow who looked exactly like me. I need to use his body for residence. I cannot find rest. Please, help." Gavin lost consciousness. He wound up in a circle at one of the tunnels located in the underbelly. His head was still in deep pain, and he noticed he was at the center of a devil's trap. Could have sworn it was the same chamber he saw Job in when Jenny demanded to know where the barghest was. His body weighed like an anvil as he attempted to rise, but failed. His friends noticed his endeavor, and Ichabod was the first to come to him. Good thing Molly wasn't here to see this. Take it easy, Gavin. You shouldn't over-exert yourself. Why do I always have to be intruded by a vengeful spirit? He sulked a little since this wasn't the first time. But this is different. Who was he? Gavin described who he saw back at the archives mirror. Ichabod? Could he really be my ancestor Leon? Freemason got the connection almost instantly. His mind flashed back to his earlier days in the Revolution. He was just enlisted as one of the freedom fighters assigned by General Washington, and he was embarking on a mission in Sleepy Hollow. There he saw a young blonde man wearing that same wardrobe Gavin just summarized. For a moment the stranger looked at him and he glanced back, though they never got a chance to meet. He did, however, notice he was a part of the militia, wearing a nervous expression. Yes, I remember now. Your brave great-uncle was involved in the war to avoid execution. I did see him there, in the platoon. It was actually thanks to your findings from your journal that put all the pieces together. But it was a dream I just had. And it was true. That tomb actually still exists. Sophie walked up to where Gavin lay. She read off the entry. Leon Lucas, October 15th, 1760 to October 31st, 1781. Survived by his parents. He died on Halloween and before Cream was nearly killed in November. He was a captain during that time, and Leon was labeled as a volunteer and a low-class soldier, even by Brom Bones. As a reject, he wanted to avoid execution. Unfortunately, he dealt with a Hessian trooper during a stormy night, Brom said. He was able to light a cannon, shooting off his head while still being wounded. Eventually, Leon died as well. Crane was right. He really did die as a hero. He passed on his legacy to you. Jake, Alex, and Diana couldn't agree more. Just then Gavin's head ached sharply once more. Only this time he rose his head, revealing glossy, brighter eyes. Their irises were a faded amber, and his face was more ambient. He only looked squarely at the former historian. You! I saw you on the battlefield. You were riding a horse, as a Whig! His voice was less deeper than Gavin's, and he nodded in affirmation. I did a benevolent thing, and yet I can't find rest. I'm afraid I'm going to the next life. I'm not. I'm afraid I'm not. I'm going to the next life. I saw him in front of me. He knew he was referring to Gavin. That was your descendant standing before you, Mr. Lucas. His name is Gavin, and he was the one who led you out of that prison. Now, you are in him. I'm a descendant? Indeed. He believed you possessed some special qualities. He still has a defective mind from birth, but he does have a fascination of the supernatural. He's a born warrior with a strong heart. Like you, He had been through quite a few tribulations considering he's handicapped, especially as far as his interests were concerned. This wasn't the first time Gavin housed a vicious ghost. He even had his legal guardian screw his mind, attempting to kill him, although Crane saved his life by expelling her. Yeah, much like you, Gavin clearly does idolize Crane, just as how you laid eyes on him. He's truly a hero, Leon. You shouldn't worry. Diana was at a loss for words. Ichabod spoke again. Leon, you have a choice. You shouldn't need to fear the great beyond. I am certain you will ascend into the heavens, where your family must be worried sick about you. I'm sure General Washington's awaiting you as well, as are the Mills ancestors. He quickly changed the subject, not sure if he knew Grace Dixon. Like them, what led a budding legacy, Leon. You paved Gavin's path on being a strong soldier, a humble person, and a lucky, courageous man, just like you. He smiled. Leon returned the expression. Wow, I never knew that before. He is here to continue what you started, Leon. There is still a war brewing, a paranormal one. We think you passed on your greatest attributes to him, even a virtue, fortitude. And you may watch over him if given the chance, guide him to his destiny, and help him save others like you did before. You have this opportunity now, Leon. Are you sure it won't end up in the underworld? Maybe in limbo? Just have faith. Jenny came in with Molly. We've heard so much about you. There's no possible way you'd end up here anywhere else. Thank you, everyone, for showing me I'm not just a reject, but rather someone I always wanted to be. His body illuminated in a bright golden aura. Then his essence ascended, leaving a lifeless vessel behind. He looked up and saw a portal of a gentle sky above him. I guess this is it. Yes, Leon. Now accept your fate. You should never fear it. He watched him dissolve into the air as she rose to the peaceful hemisphere. That's what's going into heaven is like. You can only hope so. All they did was look up the ceiling of the echoing chamber until Gavin began to stir. They recapped everything that transpired at Stid Molly during her travels. Later on it was official. During an interview, or rather a news break, Reyes became the new director of the FBI Westchester branch. She mentioned she'd keep Abby's spirit alive as well as the fallen Walters and Reynolds. And she also promised that Sophie would make a great replacement, especially as far as any unnatural occurrences. Sophia bid the team farewell, especially to Gavin, who had no hard feelings. Before she left them at the archive, she said that Walters was revealed to be a member of Agency 355, the same secret society which battled supernatural forces, which was founded by General Washington back in 1789. Although Ichabod was chosen as the leader before his death, she stated that Ezra knew about the organization and warned Ichabod that there were many members who lost their way. Whether Walters lost his way or not is unknown as of now, and being that she found that Ichabod was damned after he showed his pentagram, she hoped he wouldn't be one of those who were unfortunate. She wanted the others to look after Crane, and Gavin stated proudly they were chosen as guardians, holding the 7 sacred virtues, as it is their duty to protect and assist the witnesses. She could also assure them that the first Corbin fowl would be found soon, with her new squad combing the area. It was still spring break, and the group volunteered with pride they'd show Molly more significant spots around the city. The more she'd know, the more prepared she and Laura would be for the upcoming apocalypse, and perhaps find a solution to Ichabod's curse. Just then, a tall man with messy, short blonde hair and a frizzled mustache marched up to the road. His clothes were in tatters, almost looking like a complete bum. He stopped next to the road sign that marked he was in Sleepy Hollow. In a raspy voice he said, "Finally, I've reached here. Jenny, you will soon be mine." I feel I should explain myself here. During season 3, I never liked Daniel Reynolds nor Sophie very much. While he's considered to be Abby's boss and her former lover during their academy years, the relationship got sour pretty quickly. First was his accusation on Jenny and Joe when hunting for a relic known as the Shard of Anubis. He clearly had no idea what Abby and the others were dealing with, nor did he care. But it just kept getting worse when he kept on questioning and forcing Abby to spill the beans. As a result, she resigned before she wound up in the catacombs. Then he sent out Sophie, and Gavin felt she was a spy of sorts, as well as Abby's temporary replacement, as if she was expendable. It was too far too late. By the time Danny realized their mission, since Abby and Joe were killed off anyway. So, as a sort of protest, I wanted him to be gone, like it or not. Fuck you, Fox. Although my feelings for Sophie changed and they were just meh. So she's the new sheriff of Sleepy Hollow, and it was rather interesting when I found on the wiki that Walters was in charge of Agency 355. Although the fate of the missing Corbin files is unknown, I still don't know what it is. Alright, Chapter 5 will be an interesting one. I'm sure you've already guessed who's the man marching into the city. Well, the next chapter should shed some light on the matter, and hopefully fill in more plot holes. I hate them! It's just as I always say. The plot holes are actually potholes in a story. No doubt. And here's an image of Gavin, as well as his ancestor Leon, while they were touching hands through the mirror. I tried my very best to mimic the outfit and Revolution since he's part of the militia as a volunteer. So, what'll happen next with Nick Hawley? Well, you'll find out later. Until next time, sleepyheads.